Hi everyone, this is Nadia. I'm an occult specialist that uses spiritual intelligence to empower entrepreneurs into a healthy, empowered life story to live a balanced life. How is toxic empathy bad for you and how can you heal from it? So the number one thing a lot of people come to find is that empathy is something that's good, right? We can understand other people's situations. We get where they're coming from. We are willing to sit down and understand them. But there now comes a point where in this society, there's something called toxic empathy. Toxic empathy is something that most people who come from abusive, dysfunctional, and traumatic or trauma based violent households, including myself, have had to experience. So, toxic empathy is basically when you put other people before you. You put other people's excuses, other people's BS, and other people's things before yourself, essentially. So, when you have not been parented correctly, when you have not had a family that has modeled love and secure, healthy attachment, and people that are really there for you, basically. It's not like, they were halfway there or they were never there, so to speak. People that were really, really there for you. It shows when people are there for you, it shows in a person because it's obvious in your appreciation of them. Now, people have this conundrum with family, and I'd like to explore that today. People have this conundrum whereby they are trained to use this phrase, quote, quote, family is everything. And, of course, if you have a good loving family, why wouldn't they be everything to you? You'd put them first, you do everything. And unfortunately, a lot of people's families are just not that. They are not the people that who supported you, loved you, guided you, cared for you. In fact, it's the complete opposite. They're probably a large chunk of your trauma. They are a large chunk of why you've struggled so much in the world, and they are a large chunk of what I consider or call toxic empathy. Toxic empathy, essentially, people pleasing is sort of under the umbrella of toxic empathy, but toxic empathy is being too understanding, too nice, too kind. It's the word too keeps coming up. You can understand people, you can be kind to people, and it's encouraged, but do it in measures where people don't take advantage of you. Do it in a place whereby you understand what angle or agenda somebody is coming from. And when you are constantly at a place where you are entrained when you were younger, or what has been modeled by your family or people, caregivers around you, is to always put other people before yourself. And should you put yourself before a family? Should you put yourself before people around you? Now you're mean, you're selfish, you don't care about anybody, you turned your back. That's nothing to do with that. It's you watching this video always need to prioritize your mental health, your emotional and physical safety above everything else. Toxic empathy is basically like, yeah, I can like show up like shit, like, oh, I had such a bad childhood, or I had such a bad background, and now that's gonna give me a license to be like shit to people, basically. And it doesn't give you a license to be horrible to. It really does not. I've heard of so many stories where people always say, well, I'm this way because insert the blank, and it's like, no, that does not warrant you to behave that way. It just does not. Okay. There is a certain modicum of politeness and decorum that should be shown in society, and people become very surprised when you are with yourself, you have a healthy relationship with yourself, that you won't tolerate that nonsense, you won't tolerate that disrespect. They become very incredulous that you have the boundary to say no to them. You have the boundary not to give them your time or not to waste your time. Because toxic empathy is basically you have to sit there and empathize with people who do not want to change their situation. They do not want to grow from their situation. This is most people in society. I make multiple videos on this stuff, but I always say toxic empathy is the number one reason people have low self-esteem, because they are constantly thinking about oh yeah, no, don't worry, that's fine, don't go out of your way, blah blah, this, that. You too understanding. I know, because I've experienced it, I went through it. Nobody taught me any better, not especially anything I'm related to. So I had to figure out what toxic empathy really is for myself. Like, What does this actually even mean? Toxic empathy is always putting people above yourself. Yes, we can have empathy for other people, we can understand their situations, but they need to show up in a certain way. That's the thing. And I have the understanding that somebody could have had a bad childhood, somebody could have had a very bad marriage, somebody could have had a very bad time at school, bullying. We get all of that. It doesn't warrant you to grow up and then become bitter towards other people. I have experienced so much of this. Like, I've just seen so many people whereby they're not toxic. Those people are not toxic, but what's happened is that what they've experienced in life has damaged them so much that now they've become toxic whether they realized it or not. So, false empathy, or like toxic empathy basically, is essentially just putting people before yourself constantly. Essentially, you don't want to do something, but you have to go do it because essentially this is what it is. This is not akin to like, well, I don't really like my job and I have to work it, but I'm looking for something else. That's not toxic. You may just not like it. Your coworkers may not be a fit or something. And this is an example I'm giving you guys. But when you partake in toxic empathy, essentially everything we're doing is a signal to the universe. You're just telling the universe, I don't really value myself, or I don't do this. And when you start standing up for yourself, when you start not to tolerate nonsense, people will be very angry with you. Like, I know for the times that I have every time I've stood up for myself, people are upset because people expect you just to like go along with things because you have a good personality, you have a good heart, and that's not how things work in this life. Everybody is responsible for their own growth and healing. I'm not responsible for anybody, and nobody is responsible for me. That's the thing. And actually, in actual fact, that's the most liberating thing, where you can forgive yourself for any mistakes you've made, or you weren't really sure about how to like what's the best way to navigate these mistakes. It's cool. We're all a work in progress, and that's totally fine. But if people want to bring BS to your door, as much as I respect people that were always a work in progress, they can take that BS somewhere else, because there is just a way of conducting yourself, of dealing with things. And what toxic empathy does is it makes you feel sorry for people in a place where they will remain in victimhood, and they won't grow. That's the biggest thing with toxic empathy. You're enabling people's nonsense. The problem with a lot of people is they think you have to be callous, and you have to be brutal, and you have to be ruthless and cold. No, you don't. You don't actually have to be that. But there are things when people have crossed the line, stop dealing with them. Just stop it, because there's no real point of like trying to flog a dead horse. It's like toxic empathy is the number one reason you're probably going to struggle with low self-esteem, because people have made you feel guilty for having your own life, for having your own opinions, for wanting to be yourself. People hate the fact you're not a sheep. People hate the fact that they can't cancel you or whatever it is, and you don't agree to whatever's going on. In the years ahead, people will not be able to buy and sell without the mark. Now, you guys know this very well. It's crazy that every day we're waking up and something else from the book of Revelations in the Bible is coming true, but here we are. You literally will not be able to buy and sell without it. They actually got it right. They're correct. My point of really referring to this without getting religious on anybody is that everything is slowly, financially, it's funny, I start with toxic empathy, and this is what's coming up. I feel like I need to share this with you guys. It will slowly get to the point that if you do not adhere to whatever you are supposed to think, your accounts will be suspended, your money will be frozen, you won't be able to eat. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to say to you guys. So toxic empathy is stop putting people before yourself. It's actually a very, very selfish thing to put people before yourself. The best thing you can do for yourself is look after yourself. Put yourself first in every situation. A lot of people are going to hear that and be like, oh, Nadia's telling us to be selfish. Yeah, to a degree, but not selfish to the point that you go around hurting people, but to the point where you're like, no, this is not in alignment with how I wish to be treated. No, thank you and goodbye. Thank you, but no thank you and goodbye. So just have a think about toxic empathy, and I remember I was having this consultation with a guy, I still remember, and I actually brought up toxic empathy, and I said, your parents, he came from a very abusive family. This is many years ago. I had this consultation with this guy, and I said, your parents trained you to be just nice. There's nothing wrong with being nice or polite, but overtly nice to the point that your level of damage is going to take a while to pull the strings, to make you feel whole and solid inside. And when people don't behave in the way you want them to behave, meaning that you are controlling to a degree, you're gonna lash out because it's like, oh, I did all this for this person, and I did. You can't use that against people. There are a lot of people that I did good things for and they didn't reciprocate, and that's just life. I don't feel bitter about it. It is what it is. Toxic empathy will be your downfall because people will always see that they can pull strings on their story. They can get you to feel sorry for them, and my God, when you start feeling sorry for people, that's the worst. You can have empathy for people, but to have sympathy, that's a whole different story. So yeah, it's one of those difficult situations that you just have to sit with. And you really have to give yourself space and time to understand that how this person and how they've conducted themselves. Some of you guys in this world are all like, oh, this person was this to me, but you've done something to provoke that out of that person. If they are normally a calm person, if they are normally not a person who really is looking for any issues, then your energetically, as I mentioned in the previous video, energetically you've provoked something out of that person. So being very mindful of your energy is the number one way to fix toxic empathy, whereby you, instead of like lashing out at people and blaming them and they did this and such a person did this, you need to understand with the energy that you're showing up with. And once you understand the energy that you're showing up with, you'll be able to fix it. I offer one-to-one consultations, elite mentoring, and rituals. If you're ever interested, please email support@thespartanite.com directly, and we'll be looking forward to serving you. Thank you.